going live. To test it out. Thank you, baby.
Alexa, cancel timer. Alexa, cancel alarm.
Your alarm is not set.
Okay, it says live. Hi, Joe. I can see now that I've gone on to another Facebook post. Hi, Joe. I can see now that I've gone on to another Facebook post. I'm getting an echo of them.
Turn off, put yourself on mute.
Put myself on mute?
Put it on mute right now.
Well, then I wouldn't be able
Put
to.
it on mute.
Okay. But if I put myself
on mute.
okay, but
There we
then
go.
nobody could hear me.
That's
right?
fine. Because for the next few seconds, the feedback goes away. You're back.
Okay,
Now,
so
unmute.
unmute. So there we go. Yay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so we're just setting up here, making sure everything's working.
Here's the problem. You have your cell phone in the background. Are you on live?
Well, I can't see the comments on there. That's why I'm doing that.
Then you can't do that.
I can't do that?
No, you have to do it on your phone if you want to do that.
just setting up here, making sure everything's working. Okay, can you get me my phone? We're just trying to get so we can see the comments because the on the live page the comments are not showing. On my home page they are.
It is.
I'm just going to use my phone.
Put this on mute.
Oh, I don't want to leave this page. No.
No, cancel.
You know what? You could actually put yourself on that Facebook to see yourself, but make certain you're on mute.
On that page, but how do I do it without muting
On
everything?
the other page, your actual Facebook Live page, you are not mute.
Okay, show me. Okay, so Facebook. All right, home.
You. Yep.
And I gotta find me. There we go. Okay, so how do I mute this and not the other?
Play.
Oh yeah, you're smart. You're smart. And then open that up. No. Wait, no, I still need to see the comments. Where are the comments? Now it's not showing the comments. Let's see. On that page, but how do I do it without moving everything? Now it's not showing the comments. Okay, can everyone hear me that's on so I know and there's no echo happening? Okay, can everyone hear me that's on so I know and there's no echo happening? Okay, can everyone hear me that's on so I know and there's no echo happening? Okay, okay. All right, how about now? Can everyone hear me? I've tried to mute this second screen so I can see the comments. So, how is this still repeating? It's not repeating on mine anymore. Great, thank you guys for letting me know. I've been hosted on Facebook Live, but I've never actually ran it. So I'm just we played with it yesterday, just trying to get all the bugs out here. Great. Just let me know if there's any problems as we get going. That would be great. So I'm Jenny Grant from Train Your Best Friend here in New Mexico. I'm from a shelter background. I worked in a shelter for 7 years and managed the operations. And since have had many years, over 20 years, working with dogs, many from deprivation backgrounds. I've worked specifically with a rescue support group for puppy mill dogs, and we also take dogs that are hoarding case dogs, anything where the dogs have some kind of isolation or deprivation background. Hi everyone, thank you for commenting. That lets me know there's living people. That's great. And I've been working with that group for over 10 years, and I've worked with other rescue groups and often with these dogs. I've just put this together. It's new, so it won't flow as well as some of my seminars that I've practiced more. But this is the first one I've done for the audience where you are behavior people. My other seminars, I have a seminar on fear of everything, basically. For dogs, and that's geared more towards the public. So this is more just a conversation on things I think would be helpful for people going to work with these dogs. Okay, I'm going to post a couple links here. Okay. Here we go. I'm going to post these. All right, so I posted my website, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody. And so if there's questions beyond this, just let me know. I've posted the support group that I help. So I do a free phone workshop, and sometimes we do Zoom lately, or sometimes we do public presentations, but usually we do at least one private support phone call for people that actively have a puppy mill dog or a hoarding case dog or dog similar in their home that they're taking care of to provide support for them. It is free. There's a small charge just to join the group for them to keep the meetup costs paid, but it's very small. Once you're joined, it's one of those $5 a year kind of thing. So, and if they get more donations, they don't charge the members, but it's a great thing. It also provides help, I think, to hear the other people that have these dogs, and everybody's at a different timetable. Some people have just adopted these dogs, other people have had them for years. So it's really helpful, I think, for people to hear that, and it also just gives them a place for support. So I do monthly. Our next call or Zoom is in April. So that, I posted the link for that. That's the Puppy Mill support group. It is a meetup.com group. We will take anybody from anywhere. It's based in DC. I'm in New Mexico now. I was originally in that area when I joined. But we will take anyone. So we do a monthly phone workshop for that. And I do Zoom and phone support for anybody who wants it. Okay. So those are those. Let's see. Okay, I wanted to thank, so I guess I'll get started since it looks like we've got time. I have a lot here, so I'm going to try to say it all. I will take questions if you have questions on what I'm talking about. I may push some of the questions to the end just because I'm not sure on the timing of everything. But if you have a question on something I'm talking about, just let me know. And if you have any trouble with the video or something, let me know. Okay, so I wanted to thank Ruby for setting this very cool conference up. When she asked me, I said, I can talk about this. If you just want me to talk, I can do that. Having done this for a long time. But it's a very cool idea, and it's very neat to see all the people that joined. It's very cool. And you'll see me turning pages every now and then. So the first thing I do when a client reaches out to me with one of these dogs is I'll discuss the least stressful way for me to enter the home if I'm entering the home. And these are great dogs to do Zoom or a phone consult. So they're very good candidates for that. So I would encourage doing that. But sometimes people do want you to come into their home. I think that's more for them feeling good about it. It's not going to change what you do as much, but it's more they want to have somebody there in person. But I will right away ask them the best way to walk in. When I adopted a special dog that was afraid of pretty much everything, he was a puppy purchased from a puppy mill, and then I adopted him at a year. I hired a veterinary behaviorist, and she came out to the house. Sadly, she's retired now because she was just great. And she came into the house, I think the best way you can come into a house with this kind of dog. She came in like a sloth. She just moved so slowly, and she was just very patient, and she just urged patience. And she just moved into the house very slowly, and we made our way to the kitchen like the sloths, like slow sloths. And she sat down away from me, and that's what I would recommend, is sitting away from the client and from the dog, trying to stay out of the dog's path as much as possible and being the least amount of stress as possible. And she sat there and talked to me calmly, and so she got to observe the dog over really many hours. She stayed many hours at my house. But that, I think, is the best way to go in. I usually, before I get there, if I'm on the phone with them, I'll do this probably with every adopted dog, but especially these dogs, I'll ask them to keep everything as calm and simple as possible before the session until we get there, until I get a chance to talk to them, to try to prevent any further misguided damage that might be happening, and ingraining fears more. I will sit away. I will sit kind of turned away from the dog. Sitting, I find, is like the best neutral position for a dog that's really scared of everything. And a lot of the puppy mill dogs and the hoarding case dogs and the dogs from other, maybe never lived in a home, never had a lot of any socialization with people, or any good socialization anyway. I find that that's sitting and kind of turned away, and it's nice if there's a piece of furniture between you and the dog, and they're in there wherever space they feel safe. So that's what I do. So my most recent client, it was a dog that was adopted more from we don't have an exact history on the dog, but it sounds to me like the dog was outside and not socialized people or ever had been in a house. And so when I got there, the dog was not coming inside. So that was the problem, is the dog started out inside and then was retreating outside, which is pretty common with some of these dogs. So we sat on the patio. I sat as far as I could, and the dog was in the corner. And we sat on the patio, and I just chatted with her and found out the first thing I do is take a history, and I kind of watch the dog from the periphery of my eye. But I'm also, what is really important is also getting a sense of the family and who lives at the house and what their situation is. That's really, really important. So in this latest case, it was a young woman who already had gone through some really traumatic family things. And often I find this is the case. You want to find out what's going on with them. There might be a serious illness in the family. There may be other things going on, and then they have adopted a dog, perhaps not knowing what they got into with the puppy mill dogs and some of these dogs from deprivation backgrounds. So, this is a dog that won't come in the house. So that's, when you adopt a dog, that's pretty serious. So I get a feel for what's happening in the household. Is this going to work? Usually these dogs, especially the puppy mill dogs, tend to be, there are exceptions, but tend to be more of the learned helplessness dogs that don't do a lot. They're more shut down. So I will ask, my regular aggression questions before I get there, but generally that's not the issue. It's more that they're just terrified and having trouble with life. So there's several ethical things, I think, when working with these dogs. They're from really horrific backgrounds. Some of them are literally kept in the dark for years. Just serious, serious deprivation. So I, ethically feel they went through hell. So if they're going into a home, the rest of their lives should be as stress-free as possible. I do think that's the ethics of it. On the other side, I think you also have to consider the family, and whether it's fair to the family to go through the sacrifices that may be being asked for this dog. In my latest case, and often what happens is I will kind of give them permission not to keep the dog. I think that's important. I think you have to do that because people feel a lot of psychological pressure, I think, to keep the dogs, to do, they feel like they should keep the dogs, regardless of how much stress that's putting on their family, their relationships, themselves. And often when I do say, okay, you've taken on a lot here, and this may take quite a long time, and we really can't predict, especially when they haven't had the dog very long, what the outcome's going to be, and say, is this going to work for you? It's okay if it doesn't work for you. And often that's when the tears will come because they have a lot of feelings around that, and they do feel guilty and they feel shame that they're not able to help, or if they've made a mistake. So there's a lot of feelings around that. It's funny when you tell people you work with dogs, they're always like, well, that must be so much fun. And I'm always like, yeah, I could fill a pool with the tears I've seen. So it is fun sometimes, and I do puppy classes, and that's kind of a fun break for me. And I do really value what I do. But, there is a lot of serious stuff happening. They will also, at this point, usually try to kind of plead with you to promise that the dog will be okay. And what I usually say after watching these dogs over years is that regardless of how horrific the background and individual resiliences with these dogs just seem to vary by dog. Usually very few of them are just easy. But some progress much more rapidly than others and are able to progress much farther than others. And that just seems to be the resiliency on that individual dog. So if they have just gotten that dog, like the last dog I saw, or they've only had him a short time, and with these dogs, time is much, much longer. I look at years, months, years, it's not weeks. Because it can take them quite a while to settle into a new house, to kind of see where they're going to be when they're settled in a safe space. Okay. So are people still on with me? I just want to check. Okay. So what I like to tell people is that it's individual, and the ceilings for how much progress they can make really vary. For some of these dogs, almost every sensory new thing is going to be scary. Sometimes, great, thank you. Every sensory thing, which includes literally everything, basically, can be scary. Sometimes grass is scary. Just going outside is scary. The sky is scary. Every noise in the house, every surface in the house is scary. Some of these dogs will just kind of retreat into a corner, which is fine. I let them do that. The good news is a lot of these dogs, once provided a safe space and people understand how to accommodate them, many of them improve over years, which is great. So they just keep improving. Like I will, especially with the group, when it's kind of neat because you get to track people over years in the lifespan of the dog. And they'll, on year 2, they'll be like, the dog played for the first time today, and it's like a party, because they had never seen the dog play before, and suddenly the dog is learning how to play. So that's kind of the good news, is that a lot of times they will continue to improve. But individuals do vary, of course. And of course, I'm a little biased because I see the people that need help. So I do occasionally in the group we'll get somebody, oh, the dog came, fit in. Usually it's a household when they say that has other dogs. The dog came in and fit in and is pretty easily, but that's pretty rare. If they've had the dog less than 6 months, I will explain you're kind of in a limbo period. So I'm taking a history on what I have, but I can't predict because I don't know when that dog kind of settles into the new place, how resilient the dog's going to be. So I'll kind of explain that. I do that with adopted dogs too. It's like we're in a limbo. I usually really stress is that we're just reducing stress and building trust. That's the primary thing. Really, a lot of this is resetting the client's expectations for the dog and really changing. They're going to be getting a sea of bad advice applied for other kinds of dogs that is really going to equal torture for some of these dogs. So you want to help them understand this dog's needs and how they're going to have to look at it differently. And again, it's perfectly fair if they don't want to. If they say, I wanted a dog I could bring to the hairdresser, I wanted a dog I could bring everywhere, that's perfectly fair, and that dog may not work for them. With any adopted dog, I usually say to expect to see changes the first year. With these dogs, you can even extend that out farther than that. And that, I do think people really value that, because then they will see as that cloud, sometimes when they first get in the house, there's a real cloud of fear suppressing all the behavior. And as that cloud lifts, they may see some new things coming out. Thank you. As that cloud lifts, they may see new behaviors coming out, and getting them ready for that is good. Barking is one of those things that comes out later. Also, I think it's very good. I also explain that sometimes it's really good to keep things simple, even if things are going pretty well, because sometimes that anxiety bomb goes off after a couple months. And then suddenly now we have the big reaction, and the dog is not coming out and not approaching people, and you've had a big change. So I always think when they first get into the home, especially these dogs that just are not mentally prepared for this, it's just about gradually getting them used to everything in this, and keeping things as simple as possible. I would coach them to expect setbacks. I was working with one dog, it was a mill dog, that was under the bed, sort of like, cats do, if you get a feral cat, and was just beginning to come out and build trust. And then a fish tank fell on the floor and flew everywhere, and all the little bits of glass that were decoration flew everywhere. And that was a major setback. The dog was back under the bed, and it was a while to get back on. So I always prepare people for that, because they will have those setbacks, because a lot of these dogs are very sensitive. If you're working with rescues, or if you're from a rescue or shelter, just to generalize, I would recommend these dogs placed in a calm home without children, with a fenced yard, with other calm dogs for their success. The other reason is this makes it easier for the adopters. If they cannot handle the dog, or they can't do everything they may want to do with the dog with their dog, if they have another dog that they can do that, that makes that much easier. Or if, let's say, the dog will not approach one member of the family at all, it's much easier if they do have a dog that they can cuddle and spend time with. And a lot of times these dogs, the one thing most of them tend to be used to, there are exceptions, there are a few that don't do well with other dogs, but a lot of them do very well with other dogs, so that gives them a lot of comfort. So that can be really helpful to have other dogs. They're definitely not good first dogs for people that have never had dogs. I'm sure everybody knows that, right? Really, I'm just going to be saying less is more a lot about everything. A couple of the things that they do that I see over and over again, they can be really weird about food, and some of them will only eat at night when nobody's there. Some of them seem terrified to eat in front of the people. Sometimes you have to play around with what they're eating on. Like you might have to I would probably put it close to wherever. They often find a space where they feel safe. Maybe it's the corner of the couch or underneath the desk. I would put the food somewhere near there and maybe put it on a towel, and not in some kind of dish that's going to clank or make noise or be shiny. Maybe even paper plates to begin with, and kind of play around and see if changing the food will work. Occasionally, they'll be the opposite and somebody has to sit there and feed them, or just be there and the dog will eat. So whatever works. Often people will call and be very stressed because the dog is not eating, and I'll usually tell them that's fine as long as it doesn't get to a dangerous point. They may go the first couple days without eating, so that's fine. And a lot of times that's what you want to be. You want to be kind of the calm one that's providing support and listening and acceptance to what's happening. And that, this is okay. I like to provide them a safe space to hide, because we do want to get that nervous system settled down. So we want to, find that space where they feel space. If you can put a box or a covered crate or something that they may enjoy in a quiet part of the house. If you see them, because sometimes they will go to a specific part of the house and kind of enjoy that space and feel safer to that space. Toys and anything new is scary, and for some of these dogs, if they've been kept in a mill forever, pretty much everything is new. So anything new can be scary. Toys can be scary, so that I would introduce very slowly and carefully. Watch how much noise it makes. That may improve. That's one of those things that may improve with time. But I would introduce them on the ground, maybe cover them, maybe play around with different things, soft toys, depending. But they can be very scary. My dog's toys were very scary until probably a year. Anything new was scary coming in. So a lot of times what I would do with him is I would introduce a new thing and cover it with a towel partially, and then partially uncover it during the day and maybe put treats around it and let him look at it. And you could tell, because sometimes he would literally leave the room if that thing was there. So I always say that new things can be monsters, regardless of what they are. And you do need to really give examples to people of what that means, because they're not going to be able to understand that. So like the fireplace makes that snappy sound, that might be very scary. Things that are normal daily things for them may be very scary. Fans in the kitchen, mechanical noises. Some of them are very sensitive to voices outside. I try to give lots of examples and maybe tell stories of other clients to help them understand. Sometimes the floor itself is a problem. I don't know if you see this a lot. I see this also with dogs from breeders. But shiny floors, slippery floors can be very scary. So a lot of times they will say the dog is at the corner of the couch, doesn't really want to leave this room, will not enter the kitchen, will not go out the back door. So some of the things you can do that can be helpful is yoga mats on the floor, get some cheap yoga mats, or rugs or bath mats, and make paths so that they'll go across it, because sometimes it's that surface that they don't like. For my dog, if they've never seen stairs, stairs are almost always scary. And also, they're slippery. Like I had wood steps. So what I got was with these little little rugs that have rubber bottoms, and you can just sit them on each step. And I kept them on forever for him because once he was not so afraid of the stairs, I was also concerned about him slipping down the stairs. So I put those on, and he did much better with those on. Later, with my collie, I had to work on open steps, the ones where the steps are, you can see between the steps and there's air. And he was absolutely terrified of those. So that we had to work on separately later. The other thing I try to tell people is if they are taking the dog out on leash, which not all of them can do that, but some can, if the dog panics, go with the way, unless they're going into traffic or something dangerous. Go into the traffic. Just go in the direction of the panic, and long as it's not dangerous for the dog. I try to avoid making them feel trapped in any way, because I think that increases the trauma quite a bit. So I think, there's a lot of talk now, which is nice these days, is giving dogs choices. So you really want to think about that with these dogs, because that can set people back a lot. One of my tricks, and we did that with the latest client with the dog was on the patio, and I said, fine, if the dog wants to stay on a patio. It was a dog suited to be outside, and she left the door open a little bit, the little slider open. And he had a little dog house there, and he liked that. But we said to encourage him to come in, let's just do little paper plates with food around the house. And sometimes they will only eat that food or go after that food at night when everything is quiet. Sometimes that's the time they will start moving around. So she did that, and we actually got a pretty quick response. He really liked food. And so he started to be in the house more and more. So she started to put the food out. So she got a lot of progress, and then he was starting to just lay down in the house rather than choosing to be on the patio. So we got a pretty quick response on that, which was nice. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes I'll do that for the people that say the dog won't leave the living room corner. So I'll say to start putting those around, not push them too far, just real easy. And, just maybe build on it, just little tiny steps, like put a couple plates out away from the dog, and then each day add more plates out. And, some dogs will only do that at night at first, and then with time, a lot of them get more and more comfortable with it. So that's a good way to kind of get them start to be comfortable with the house and the new surroundings and everything. And I also used the little plates for my dog for the open steps, because I don't really want training to be icky for the dogs and get a bad association, and I don't want that relationship with the person to get a bad association because they're being paired with some of these things that are stressful for the dog. So with my collie, what I did is I put paper plates on the open steps I had in the garage, and left him to choose whether he wanted to get that food. And I really just would hang back. And it was very hard for him, and he would pant and, go, and then he would leap back, and it was a struggle, but he was doing it himself, and so we would work on that. And eventually he got it, and it was him deciding when he could do that or if he wanted to do that. And I just did, 1 or 2 steps at first, 3 steps, just gradually from there. Okay. For the mill dogs and for the hoarding case dogs, house trading is another place where you want to set expectations. House training can be quite difficult with these dogs because they've been kept in very filthy environments and cages. Often a lot of them will eat their own poo or even drink their urine. They have some odd behaviors due to being kept in these small captive spaces. But I usually will, try to reset their expectations and really encourage any kind of progress with house training. And we'll talk about doing it without stressing the dog. These are dogs that I would be more apt to. I'm not a big paper training person unless the person wants that specifically. But for these dogs, that could be a good way to go, especially if we're working with a dog that doesn't want to be outside to start with. People do make progress usually on the house training. Some of them are never perfect. So if it's a person that is really the perfectionist and that's going to be the end of the world, this may not be the best fit for them. But some of them do get house trained. But I would say more fall undo, and occasionally they have the accident. They can act odd and just kind of be mentally checked out. They're a lot of times, again, more into the learned helplessness area, whereas they're doing less. And so they can be hard to read. You really have to train the people how to see when they're stressed and when they're more relaxed and what to look for. And of course, in the beginning, a lot of times they're always stressed. So we look for different things. But I find my clients get quite good at seeing, the ears are a little bit forward or the tail's a little bit up, or, when the dog is coming out of it a little bit. A couple things to avoid. Of course, I don't ever want to force them to do anything. I have had a couple people before I've arrived, try to get the dog walk in the neighborhood, or try to get the dog to like a family member by having them. In one case, it was just really a bad situation because the dog was afraid of the husband, and he walked him and fed him because he was following advice. The whole time he was doing that, dog was just horrified, and this dog would eat no matter what. It was a dog that was brought in from the outside, and I think was always had a shortage of food, so it would eat regardless of how stressed it seemed to be. So we want to avoid ingraining fear of walking in their own neighborhood because I've seen that happen. I've had people that have to get in the car and go to another neighborhood because that initial fear of the neighborhood was so great and was so ingrained in the beginning. Also with family members, I always say we don't want to have your brother-in-law that comes over a lot to make a really bad association here. So we're going to take it easy and back off. So that's one of those things, as I always try to stress, is in the beginning their nervous system is really charged up and they're just ready to be afraid of something. It's like when you're at a scary movie and you're just ready to jump at something. So we don't want to create any problems that aren't already there. Some of the harder cases are when these dogs are put into apartments with things like elevators, and of course crowded areas. Some of the tricks you can do for the elevator is put the dog, especially if it's a little dog. A lot of the mill dogs, not all, but some of them are little dogs. You could put them in a carrier and cover that carrier to bring them out. You could even get them used to a little sound machine that you put in the carrier so that it kind of has some safety noise. You can use a calming cap in the car. You can use a calming cap in the car once the calming cap is very carefully, slowly, classically conditioned to the dog. If it's a dog you can't touch, that's not going to be a great start, but eventually, as they work with the dog, a calming cap to get in the car, get in the elevator, or go down the stairs, or whatever it is they're doing. I had one woman who was going down the stairs to try to avoid people. She was getting lots of exercise, going up and down flights of stairs, because getting in the elevator was a very big issue for the dog. That was a Westie. And I think we did do the carrier with that dog to get the dog out, because also that was creating conflict, trying to pass people going out of the building. That was in DC, so that was city. Okay. A really helpful tip for a lot of these dogs is a lot of these dogs are more comfortable with other dogs. So if the person doesn't have another dog, they can bring in a friendly, calm dog to see if that can help them get the dog to explore a little bit more. Hopefully just relax them and maybe enjoy the time with the other dog. I've used other dogs to get dogs in cars that are very afraid of cars. A lot of these dogs are going to be very afraid of cars because their first experience with a car is going to be being rescued, going to a vet, which all could be very traumatic. So to that kind of dog that's just not used to anything. Many of the dogs have major handling issues. Great. So sometimes we'll put a harness, a nice secure harness that's comfortable, with an ID tag on the dog. And I like it to have the clip down the back of the dog because, again, I'm sure as you all know, reaching towards the head can be very scary for a lot of these dogs in the beginning. So just so we have an ID and a way to get the dog if we need to. Sometimes we'll put a harness on the dog if it's a dog that's really, really afraid of handling. Some of them will bond with their person, one person in the house, and that is not an issue, but a lot of them, it is an issue. So just putting the leash on can be a big project. Okay, so, and then I would always have an ID. I'm sure you've all heard the cases of the fearful dog that has gotten away right after somebody's adopted them. I would make sure that they have ID with the person's address and with their phone number. If they have the address, I feel like if the neighbor picks them up, they're more likely to bring them back home and get in contact with the people rather than having them go through the stress of getting, picked up by animal control and all those different encounters. Yeah, speaking of being handled, I worked very long time with my collie on being groomed, and I got him to where I could brush him. Touching was a big deal for him. But I confess, his whole life, he never had a bath. I worked on it for a while, and he was just so terrified, and just working on it would have been just such an undertaking. What I did was I got to the point where I could put conditioner on his fur, and then I could brush him, and that kind of cleaned him. And he actually always smelled very clean. He was kind of clean like a cat. He always smelled sort of like apricots some magical way, but but I never did bathe him because it just would have been too much stress. He was a very neat dog. He didn't like to get dirty, so it was never really a problem. And I imagine before I got him, they had given him a bath, which must have been very traumatic for him. Because just even getting into the bathroom anywhere near a bathtub was a major thing. And I worked on it a bit, but then I was like, this is not worth my trouble. Okay. If another common problem is if they're afraid of one member of the house, again, a lot of times they'll kind of glom onto one person. And so my rule for that is, that person doesn't do anything icky with the dog. He doesn't do anything basically practical with the dog. And they'll just dribble food, the best food, and that we reserve the best food for that person. If that's an unwilling person and that they will try not to walk at the dog, look at the dog, talk at the dog, just be really quiet and ignore the dog and just kind of dribble the best food. Around. If that person is unwilling to help, because a lot of times I will get kind of the primary care person hiring me and perhaps the rest of the household is not on board, I will say, you can feed the dog when that person comes into the room. So the the primary person can dribble the food. And I don't want the person that the dog is scared of to move closer and then dribble the food. I just dribble the food and the dog can kind of follow up behind him. I do use sound machines. With my dog, the TV, I wouldn't do this if the TV scared them, but I would have the TV on because that starts to get them used to random sounds. It helped a lot with my dog, and I noticed the difference if I just used music and sound machines, but didn't have the TV on for him. On those days when I tried to take him out for walks, which was like a goal at that point. And later he did like to walk in his neighborhood. He was more of a homebody the rest of his life. And I could occasionally hike with him, but for the most part, he really just liked to walk the neighborhood and smell his smells. The TV just did kind of offer exposure in a gentle way, and he never seemed to be afraid of it. I wouldn't do it if they were afraid of the TV. Some dogs are. Some of these dogs, we do that game where you leave the door open, they go out, you get out of the way, and then they come back in and you get out of the way until they can be handled. So that's why a fenced yard is really a good idea with these dogs, because that may be where you start from. Often I find dogs that are not socialized to human worlds are afraid of doorways, halls, slippery floors, stairs. Those just I see over and over again. They'll kind of run through the door like it's gonna kill them and snap. So again, a lot of times I'll do those paper plates in and out of the doorway to try to encourage them to get a little used to that, and maybe put the rugs down to change the way that looks a little bit. I did have one dog that really, really was afraid of grass, and she was a little dog, blind and deaf, and there really was no reason for her. She just, eventually she got used to it a little bit, but mostly she just kept her on the cement, and where she lived, that was fine. That dog also, many of the mill dogs and some of the hoarding case dogs will come with a lot of health issues already. Okay. So that you also have to get into, and trying to reduce the stress so we don't set back all the progress going to the vet. That dog I just talked about had an assortment of physical problems. So going to the vet was always something to try to reduce to reduce stress going to the vet, and trying not to have big setbacks with that. Was always something we were working on. Find the gentlest vet you can. If it's something where the vet can come to the house and you can find a gentle vet to do that, that is great. Because again, some of these dogs, moving them out is hard. Sometimes a flat activity toy, but even a paper plate or a plate smeared with some kind of delicious food. For my collies, cream cheese, meat, baby food, canned food, something that they really like, can be used at times when you want to keep them in one area, or you're working on keeping them in one area, or making a room maybe nicer. You could leave that there and let them lick it. Usually with these dogs, I will not start with a clicker. If we're doing any training at all, and training can only happen after they're eating from the person, I'll use a soft yip. Unless they already told me, like the dog I just did, the dog was fine with the clicker. The dog on the patio that wouldn't come inside. So the dog was fine on the patio. Or they could wrap the clicker, but I would just shy away from that until I got a feel for how that dog was around sounds. I did have a Sheltie I worked with that, I started them with the clicker 3 rooms away. And that dog, so they would click 3 rooms away, and then they would drop fantastic food. And the dog loved the clicker after a while, and it started out terrified of that noise. But the dog did grow to like that. Okay. So a good place to start with training with these dogs is just, you're going to simplify everything down to just many things. Is just sitting in a chair and tossing food. and having the dog eat it. Especially, if they're saying the dog will not eat from them, if they could start with that. When I did a fearful dog class with a lot of mill dogs and things, dogs really terrified, they would bring an assortment of foods, and usually cheese would win. Not every dog can have cheese, but I would tell you that was usually the one that won. We'd have little cheese balls and kind of just gently toss them low, and you have to show them how to do it. And that's a good place for them to start, is just working on getting that dog to eat, because then we can start working on other things. But I would do the toss so the dog doesn't have to get right on top of the person if that's very stressful. And adjust anytime the dog is stressed. It may be we just do this once because this dog is so stressed that just doing that is like a big thing. So we're always adjusting. I would keep training really short. If the dog is already really, really stressed, learning is also stressful. My dog would leave the room, so I had to start really, really small. So for some dogs, we play a game. If the dog approaches at all, it could be even just an inch, I don't care. you toss the treat behind them, so kind of immediately relieving that stress. And for some dogs, that's very effective. They'll start coming closer and closer because that treat is being delivered behind them, away from the person. So that can be a good exercise. A good thing for them to do is anytime they put the leash on is to give a treat out front, if they can, if the dog is taking food. Because putting the leash on or putting the harness on is often a big issue. For most of these dogs, I only train active behaviors in the beginning because that's what they need. They're not coming out. Again, it's more of a learned helplessness. They're not doing anything. So I don't really want them to stay. I don't want them to sit. I don't want them to do it. I want them to come, and do like a very simple target or moving towards or coming towards me or anything like moving is good. So those are the things we're going to stick to in the beginning. You can do, if it's a very foodie dog, and some of them are, you can do a smeared spoon and have them lick it, but I would again introduce that flat on the floor underneath a towel, just very, very gradually. And then usually what I do with the spoon is I'll put it up my sleeve in the beginning if they're taking from my hand, and then lower it so they learn to lick the spoon. And that can help with the walking. Okay. So I still have a lot left. I want to leave you a couple minutes for questions, but I just train a few things in the beginning, or just working on conditioning, just a few things. Goals I like to set for people is getting that dog in the car, because it's always going to be a time where they have roofers, they're getting the carpet changed. Yeah, there's going to be things that come up where they need to go in the car to a second location. So working on that being less stressful, and working on a second location, maybe a friend's house where they can go with the dog or leave the dog at times. That's a good goal. Because there's always going to be a time where they have to go in the car. They might have to go for the vet, and I don't want the only time they go in the car to be to go to the vet. So that may be, if you've already worked on the household things, that may be a good next goal. If they are working on walking, I like to just tell them, just do little forays out and come back in. Never force the dog. This is where they create a lot of fears, by forcing and maybe trying to follow other advice from the internet. So I always say no pressure, just little forays out and come back, and they can do that a few times during the day. If the dog is taking food, you can really stress like activity and environmental enrichment as ways to fulfill the dog. That's not going to stress them. And again, that may be putting food on a washcloth instead of a toy, because the toy might be scary. So starting there, and with time, a lot of times, they will like toys, but that's going to be months, usually. Or there may be certain toys that they like cloth toys. I would, with the client, determine simple, really super simple goals to start, and really keep adjusting their expectations and supporting them. A lot of times I will give them just a little thing to do, and they'll catch up with them a couple months later, because this is really over time. Okay, so that's all the tips. I had my notes. There's lots to say about this. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I can only see, I'm not on the other page, so I can only see the comments in the Facebook, so let me know if there's any questions at all. Okay, I don't see any questions. Let's see. So again, I've posted the links for the Puppy Mill Support Group. It's a meetup group, and we can take anybody from anywhere, and we do a phone call or Zoom lately workshop with everybody. We do require that everybody have one of these dogs and need support in their home. They can call from anywhere, or they can get on the Zoom from anywhere they are. And so that we do monthly. So if you want to join, that's free, except for just a $5 membership to keep the meetup up for the group. I do think there's, a lot of ethics. I think whoever's doing this, I came from a psychology background where I counseled people, I think, and I've studied working and communicating and listening to people. So I think if you're working with these dogs, you really need to be calm. When people ask me what I do now, I say I'm patient with people. That's my biggest job, is to be patient with people. To really kind of accept what's happening in their house and sit down and get to know the family and see what's going to work for them. And you do get ethical, moral things that come up. I had one couple, this was a first dog, that they got a very challenging dog, and they were not going to have children. They were planning on having children. They were not going to have children because of the dog, because really what happens, I think, when you get the dog, it's like the first child, right? And that was very moral, and I just had, I had to think about it and say, I really don't think this is the right decision for you. And they have, they didn't keep the dog, and they sent me pictures of their new baby, and they everything, and they were really in over their head with this dog. In general, it was a tough dog, and it was not a good adoption. That wasn't a good placement for that dog. The dog needed a very savvy person. And even then, they might not have been able to help that dog. But you do get these really ethical things happening, and the clients feel very guilty very easily and very shamed, like they have failed. And again, they'll get just a ton of bad advice from everyone around them, not understanding how special these dogs are and how much compassion and empathy you have to have for them. And for the clients. People post about dogs having unconditional love. I always think of my clients that are loving a dog that they can't touch, and being happy with, being able to touch them a little bit in a year, and again, some of them are much faster than that. That's just some of them. And some of them cuddle more, but sometimes they may cuddle just one person in the house. Did have one case where the husband really was getting no love, and every time he walked in the room, the dog was afraid, and it was getting to be, I could see, very hard on the husband. We were in Fearful Dog class, and I accidentally made a noise, which happens, and the dog reacted, and I said, "I'm sorry," and he said, "Oh, don't worry, it's my fault," because he felt like everything was his fault. And I usually don't do this, but this was one case where I said, would you consider getting another dog so that this man could get some love? So they adopted the sweetest, most beautiful pit bull, and that helped the other dog. The new friendly, no zero space pit bull would be on his lap, and the other dog would start to sit with him on the couch. And so it improved things a great deal. And then he had a dog that he was getting plenty of love, and the wife could spend more time with the other dog. So that's that. Well, anyway, so I'm Jenny Grant from trainyourbestfriend.com. And if you have any follow-up questions, just let me know. This is the first time I've done Facebook Live. I really can't see too much. I can see the comments, but I don't know too much what's happening. But I enjoyed talking to everybody. Thank you. And I will look over here. Let's see. And I don't know, is there anything I should do when I end the video? I don't know if there's something.
Should just be X out.
Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you for those who've listened or are listening later. I don't know exactly how this works, but thank you. Enjoyed talking to everybody, and this is a great virtual conference. Take care. Bye-bye.